All right, guys. Good morning. The Four Agreements, pages 47, 48, 49, 50. This is the third chapter, the second agreement. Don't take anything personally. And I'm drinking some coffee right now. So, as I'm trying to finish up this coffee, basically, the beginning of this chapter of Don't Take Anything Personally is pretty much what we would assume it's about is, the thought processes behind taking things personally. So, Miguel Ruiz, Don Miguel Ruiz makes a good point here. I don't know. There's a quote that I liked on page 48. It says, "Nothing other people do is because of you, it is because of themselves." Now, I don't know if you're like me on some things, but it really can depend how I feel. And if I'm gonna take things personally, sometimes it's like every single thing rolls off my back. And then if it's, you know, a day where I'm kind of feeling maybe not at my best, or like I get to a period of time during that day where I'm just not feeling as good as I was at other times of the day, I can definitely go into this feel of, just not feeling well, not feeling good, feeling like frustrated and stressed out, and just maybe not so, just not having like the most pleasant of experiences, just on my own. Like, it has nothing to do with anybody else. Like, I can wake up and be like thinking about something somebody did that was like insensitive or whatever, like yesterday or a week ago or a month ago, and just kind of be replaying it in my head. Um, I am kind of sensitive to, different things that happen in social settings, but, I don't think I'm the only person that's like that. I just think it's just kind of naturally how I am, like with my personality. So I do have to like catch myself a lot of the time. I do find myself having to catch myself when I get into a mindset like that, where I'm kind of like spiraling, thinking about some random negative thing, especially if it wasn't anything immediate. It's kind of like, okay, like, do I really need to be thinking about this? Like, you know, like, I've known a lot of people, I've explained kind of how I grew up, in a lot of social environments. So I've had a lot of social experiences with a lot of people. The majority of those experiences are good, but here and there, I've had people in my life that are like really not the best of people to have in my life, to keep in my life, and have either forced to try to maintain relationships with people, like maybe not deep relationships, but maintaining like some kind of like, we have to get along. Like if it's like a boss, or someone who kind of holds the key, or I feel like they hold the key in some way to something that I need, it's like, well, I gotta kind of play by their rules, right? It's like, I've had bosses or supervisors that I'm like, when I was in practicum and stuff, where it's like, okay, I don't really have a lot of experience, and these people accepted me into this workspace, and they're kind of in charge of my, future in a way. Like, I I don't want a lot of my time and effort and energy to go to waste. Um, and especially because, in my past, like I guess my academic career, you know, not that I didn't try or that I wasn't working hard, but there were times where things weren't really going so easily, and so, you know, my my idea of the goals I was shooting for, like I usually shoot pretty high with that kind of gives me room to have some failure involved. So shooting high and then having room for failure, it's like even if I do land somewhere under, my top goal, it's like I'm still within a range of something that I'm trying to do. And so, I've had experiences like that where I've had like supervisors, bosses, directors just being kind of like, maybe they're not the best of people socially with other people, especially people who are like practicum students or people who are like entry level, and you know, or I would feel like misunderstood by them, that maybe they didn't understand like kind of how I worked, and maybe they would assume I was lazy. Like I would kind of get those impressions from certain people that they would kind of assume one thing or another, like negatively about me, but then also they would rely on me for a lot of stuff. So it's kind of like, they would always ask me to do stuff. They would always rely on me for different stuff. I was dependable, and so it was kind of like this weird, like, situation sometimes where people would make me feel maybe like a little bit bad about not being fast enough, or when they would walk by and they would see me do something and assume I'm slacking off, when it's like, oh well, some other boss told me to do this other thing. Like I remember specifically, once where one of I think my assistant director, we were gonna have a client that was, pretty frustrated already with the process and had a lot of records and was just like over it. And she comes in like, look, like I'm gonna get enrolled today, but I really would like the person assessing me to thoroughly read and know my background so that I'm not just having to rehash this over and over and over, because they had just recently gotten assessed at a hospital, at another site, and we do the same form of assessments, and so it's like they already had the records in the system from the last couple days updated, and so I was the one in charge of this of doing this assessment before the client would see the psychiatrist. And so, my assistant director kind of explained, hey, this assessment, just make it start a little bit late so you can review the files. And so, I'm at the computer just like reading the files, and the director comes in who doesn't know this from that. Like, she's not involved at all. She just glances around and sees what she's going to see, and then makes her own decision, like based her own opinions, based on what she kind of observes. And she was like never, she was one of those people who's like never in the office, always doing like 30 things at once. Like she didn't really connect or really like know the day to day of the staff. And so, she sees me, it's a bullpen style, room. Everyone else has clients, so they're all out of the room. And she sees me in there sitting at the computer. I'm a little bit like leaned back in my chair a little bit, but just like reading what's on the screen. And so to her, she's like, well, if you need something to do, she walks by me and like, if you need something to do, you can do, I have a task for you. And then I didn't say anything, and then the assistant director comes up like, oh, I asked her to review this. She's got a really hard assessment coming up, and she's, reviewing, before seeing the client. And it wasn't the first time that that director had made those kind of comments towards me. But it was kind of like, I could kind of see that they thought maybe that I'm lazy or that I am slacking or whatever. But it's kind of interesting because at that job I was never slacking, I was never lazy, I was always busy, I was always doing overtime, I was always working before work. Like I was busier than the majority of the people there, and the assistant director knew this about me, but the director was just kind of like having a negative attitude. But also, I didn't involve myself with this director a lot, right? Because she was never really available, so she didn't really know me, and so I kind of realized that when I've had supervisors, bosses, directors, whatever you want to call them, a lot of times when they don't know me really well, just because I have a pretty calm demeanor and the way I might seem, because I'm not like frantically like freaking out all day and stuff and like spazzing out and like anxiously working and like running around and stuff. Like I seem calm and I kind of take my time and I get stuff done. But when they see that, sometimes they're like, "Oh, like you don't look like the other staff who are like stressed out and like busy and like running all over." It's like I would have certain times a day where I would be like, okay, let me get up from my desk and go do this, all these tasks, like a whole list of tasks in the chart room or at the mailboxes or whatever. And so I wouldn't have to be going like back and forth and like going back and forth like that. Like I would basically, because for me it felt a little more efficient and it broke up my day better versus being like, oh, like, um, so yeah, like I guess that's probably the example that comes to mind the best for me is, when I've had people just thinking negatively, like maybe they didn't say like directly to me, oh, like you're this way or that way, but I would kind of assume that they would think that way. Um, but then again, it's like they never fired me, they never called me into the office about my performance, like if I'm being too slow, if I'm looking too lazy or anything like that. Like I always got good reviews. And so it's like you they would treat me one way kind of sometimes, but then it's like I don't think I was really problematic, right? But then again, thinking about, them and kind of like everyone else they were around, I was kind of like unique in that way. And like just in the way that I work, I'm a little bit unique. I kind of just sit and look like I'm staring, but like I get things done. It's just I think a lot too, um, and I am easily distracted. I'm very easily distracted. It's hard for me to kind of get organized sometimes. If I don't like sit and just like organize what I'm doing for the next couple hours, like before I start doing it, then it's going to be a little bit difficult most of the time. So, yeah, and usually it's also going to be the negative stuff. If somebody thinks something negatively, that's probably going to stick more than if somebody thinks something positively. I mean, I've definitely had way more people say positive stuff towards me than negative stuff, but for sure the negative stuff is what sticks out. And so it's like, well, I've had most people, I would say most people I know don't really have a problem with me. I don't have a problem with them. And, it is um, a little bit of a challenge to have, you know, uh, um, like I guess it's a bit of a challenge to have, um, just memories of different situations that have happened. Um, I wouldn't say that I currently have any situation where there's somebody in my life that's routinely, getting to me on a daily basis. Um, Definitely my memories of certain types of people like that do get to me, but like still, um, but I wouldn't say that I have anybody currently like that. Just mostly because almost everything I do is pretty remote, and I haven't been like in a workspace, in a public workspace in a pretty long time. It's been like over 6 months now. Um, but yeah, I don't really, like I do little stuff, like maybe like Uber Eats. So if I'm doing little Uber Eats stuff, like I don't really think that is interfering uh, too much socially in my life. Like I'm just kind of like, like that's just what it is. Um, but yeah, like as far as that type of, you know, thinking about other people, taking things personally, um, I mean, we all have imperfections, and other people aren't really going to see things the same way that I do, and that's fine. Like we're different people completely. The book talks about people being in their own worlds because they have their own background of what they've dealt with, how they've been conditioned. I was listening to this Prince interview, or the artist formerly known as Prince interview, last night, where it was old. I think it was with Larry King or something like that. It was like an old interview where he was talking about like various topics, and I think that was the interview where I guess he was kind of talking about his creativity coming from God, but he did mention something kind of along those lines right before that, where he was saying, you know, um, he was saying he recognizes that he was influenced by his father, and his father was influenced by his father, and his father influenced by his father. And when I'm thinking about like how we're conditioned, how we grow up, how we're raised and come to conclusions that we come to, and deal with the things positively that we deal with, as well as dealing with the things negatively that we deal with. um, a lot of it is influenced by the people who raised us, in our upbringing. you know we started to form the ways that we think about life and address different things that come up in life, even if it's like someone being negative towards you. You've had people model certain things for you in the past. You've had people model anger, you've had people model sadness, you've had people model, delight, you've had people model love, you've had people model joy, you've had people model all kinds of stuff like dishonesty, you've had people model, like different weird little things like work ethic. Um, one thing that I would say, I definitely learned from some older family members was this whole like, just lying about things, like little white lies. Like I used to know people that would just tell little white lies all the time about like everything. And, when I was younger, I grew up with that, and, I kind of knew that they weren't telling the truth. Um, but it was always like something to make them feel more important or something like that. And you know I would kind of just see it and just be like, whatever. Like it's not a very valued trait, I would say. But I definitely picked that up in my youth, in my teen years. um, I would just be like lying about stuff. Like it would be like anything. Lying about the friends I had at school, lying about, you know, different, situations that happened that never even happened. I'd just be like making stuff up. Um, because I don't know exactly why, but I would say probably because it made me feel or seem more interesting. And then also because I didn't really think too much about it being wrong until I had some friends that kind of pointed out to me, like they were nice about it, surprisingly. And I'm glad that they were nice about it, but it's like, I don't know how they put up with me. But they would just be like, that's not how that happened, you know? Like, you know? And they would just keep like saying what actually happened with the truthful details versus like, you know, and it kind of got to a point where um, I remember talking about some book or something, and somebody assumed it was like in the Bible or something, and they're like, that book you were talking about, I think it was like the Book of Enoch, and they were like, oh, well, I went in the Bible, and my one with the Apocrypha, and the Book of Enoch isn't in there, and like, and I was just like, because I mean, like, they were assuming that I was like lying to them about it or something. But I was like, no, it's not in the Apocrypha. It's its own like separate little book. It's a whole different book, and but it was just kind of interesting that I was like, wow, like you know, I don't really have a very trustworthy reputation with the things that I say because you know people were just knowing that I was just like just saying whatever the fuck, but you know, like I've stopped doing that. But that's kind of just how I was, and I didn't really think twice about it because I was around adults in my life that were doing that. I saw them doing it all the time. You know, people at church, people who were in, you know, positions of power, you know, family members. I saw people doing it all the time, so I just did it too and didn't really think too much about like how is this affecting other people. Like it was fun for me. It felt good for me making up like random stories about my day. It's like, yeah, my days are boring. I'm not really doing anything that exciting, but the things that I would say I would be doing would be like, wow, like your day must have been pretty cool. Like that was a fun thing that you had happen. But it wasn't like all lies all the time, but like it was a lot of just like bullshit. And you know, it did get to a point where I was like, I can't even like keep up with like what I said, you know? Like I don't even remember what I was saying. But like I didn't really feel bad about it till like later on where I was like, I gotta stop doing this. This doesn't, you know, it doesn't help anything. But it did help me kind of like keep a distance from people because it was like, you know, it was kind of like a protective measure to some extent. But at the same time, it was like, you can't be doing that, you know? Um, and you know, like I matured out of it and kind of realized, you know, that's not the best way to develop relationships with people. And I did start like working more towards my values of having like authentic relationships with people. Once I kind of started knowing what safer spaces were like and, you know, things like that with different people, I was able to kind of calm a lot of that down because it was like, well, these people aren't judging me. If I have a boring day, if I have a shitty day, if I have a great day, you know, they would celebrate the successes, and then anything that was, you know, troubling kind of situation, we would kind of like talk about it, and it was like, okay, well, you know, and that kind of helped. That's all it really took was just like meeting people that were kind of more, you know, just not jerks, basically. And so, yeah, like it's definitely a struggle, guys. Like I know it's a struggle to be like um, trying to, uh, you know, get things right, you know, but it's like I would say the the best way to address things is to know what you value and try to work towards that without all the little distractions that the ego kind of places in there. Um, like pretty much anytime when there's something that's, you know, I want to do this, but how come I'm not getting closer and closer to that every day? Usually there's some kind of ego defense coming up. Like, it can be something as simple as, I have all these plans of what I want to do the next day, but I'm a little like concerned, like a little, um, you know, I have a little bit of concern about, um, maybe things I want to do, um, but, um, but yeah, there's something getting in the way, and so, like lately, that's kind of how. I mean, it's not really on this topic, but that's kind of how my days have been going. Like I've been really having trouble getting organized because there's a lot of stuff I'm working on, and I noticed that there is a lot of anxiety behind like putting in the effort and not getting the results. Like I've had a lot of that in this last year with trying to kind of get up to speed with all the tech stuff that I'm doing and some online stores and different stuff. And it's kind of like I kind of noticed the little areas where I'm like, okay, I didn't really follow these steps to the T, and maybe that's why this or that didn't work out. But then it's like I also put in all this effort, and so it's like, you know, um, and now I'm kind of at a point where a lot of the effort I've been putting in over multiple months is kind of paying off. I'm getting interviews or offered interviews and all this different kind of stuff. And it's scary, Like yesterday I was like nearly freaking out, I was like, I am not ready for this. Like I am not ready to be like jumping into a new career. Like it was hard enough for me to get to the point where I was comfortable applying to jobs, and now that I've been applying, now the interview options are kind of rolling in, and I'm noticing that I'm applying for stuff that isn't really what I want sometimes. Like I'm just like applying for it just because it's there, and then I get offered an interview and I'm like, oh, okay, but then I'm like, I don't really want to do this anyways, I'm not like really into it, you know what I mean? Into that site or that job. I just was applying because it's kind of like vaguely related to what I want. And so now I'm like, okay, now I've got a lot of options rolling in of stuff that's not really something that I need to do. Um, but then it's like, it's easy for me to like want to jump into something and get unfocused. And, just because it's like, well, if I take just any old job, which I could do, but if I just take any old job, um, I'll be, that'll be helpful. But at the same time, it's like now I have to learn this new job and do well at this new job, and knowing that I'm going to be wanting to quit even when I first start, because this isn't really what I want. And it's like, you know, that's a kind of like defensive method of trying to get a job. It's like, okay, why would I even apply for stuff that I don't really want? It's easier to get rejected from something I don't want. It's easier to get accepted and then think in the background of all the negative things about a job that I might have that I don't want. You know, Even when I'm doing my own solo stuff, it's easier to, not do it some days or get really unfocused and off track and doing other stuff, you know. Um, but, that's just with jobs and stuff. That has nothing to really do with people. It's just me and myself. But I mean, we do the same types of things when it comes to, people, relationships with people, stuff like that. It's like we could value wanting those relationships to be good and strong, but then, the way we go about it sometimes is maybe not the best. And it depends how we're feeling and how we're doing. If my health isn't good, I'm going to be acting in ways that aren't good all the time, like, um, it could be little stuff, but it's like, sometimes it's like it just takes a little bit, take a step back, just reflect on things. Um, but yeah, not taking things personally can really be a challenge. Um, it's not something that a lot of us really are taught how to practice. We're usually taught to take things personally, or at least that's what's modeled for most of us. Is you see somebody do something, and then do something to somebody else, and then either if it's good or bad, and then you see how somebody else reacts, and it's like, well, I should react like this. If somebody bad mouths me, I should go gossip about them and go tell them off in front of everybody, or hold on to it, hold a grudge. Like, I'm not saying that people should like embark on toxic relationships, but sometimes it's like, if it's just like an accidental non-abusive situation, or just somebody in their own imperfections saying something imperfect or doing something imperfect, like all of us do, it's like, really, am I gonna write that person off? Because it's like, it's funny. Like, I guess this is the last thing I'll say on this, but like, it's kind of interesting how I interpret people who might have a negative opinion of me, is I tend to have a negative opinion about them too, which is kind of interesting. And especially people who have maybe wronged me, and they don't seem to ever apologize or anything like that, and they kind of react that way. And yeah, like, it's really um um I don't really know. Like, it's just something to try to think about, because it gets in the way. It's like, sometimes when something happens in the past, it's like, what are you gonna do about it? Like, it really doesn't bring value to the current moment to think about those things. And I'm really noticing that. It's like, some stuff is like, do I really need to be thinking about this? Like, is it really that kind of a thing that I need to be like sitting and thinking about? Um, like, if it's like something that happened involving another person, is like, I don't really need to think about this. But all right, guys. Well, I gotta get on with my morning. It's a little after 8:30. It's 8:35 a.m. I gotta get on with my day so I can get some stuff done as early as possible before I start to talk myself out of things and run out of energy. So with that, thanks for listening.